Hello and welcome to Comic Cuts, the panel show. I'm Kev F, the guy who writes and draws comics for Beano and Marvel and now adapts Shakespeare for kids and also does the Scottish falsetto sock puppet theatre. But that's not really what's important, because what's important are my guests, and my guests today are Davey Jones and Andre Vincent.
Oi, oi.
Hello.
All right.
Comic Cuts. We're looking at a panel, and we comprise a panel. There's a few of us, so the panel sees a panel, and we talk about the comics from the panel we discuss, and we call it Comic Cuts. My two guests have brought with me a panel from a comic or something close, and we're going to see if we can identify it and have a chat about it, and maybe we and you will learn something about comics we didn't already know, or maybe we'll just show off a bit and have an enjoyable chat. Let's see. First of all, got to introduce my two guests. Listener at home, I'm not entirely sure how familiar you'll be with my guests, coming as they do from two totally different worlds. Davey from the world of comics. Hello.
Hello.
And I've got to tell you, Davey, you are very much a friend of the podcast. The comic for which you work, Viz, has been the single most selected comic when people have brought in a panel. And the trailer that I do for the show, the little clip that I play at the end of every episode, is Adam Roche, the historian and podcaster, and Hannah Berry, the one-time comics laureate, discussing Donald Sinden in Whoops, There Goes My Knighthood.
Yes.
Do you remember that one, Davey?
I do, yes. Actually, I did listen to that. You gave me a heads up about that podcast, and I listened to it. It was very gratifying. What I especially liked about it was that Adam was laughing so much, but he was also ashamed of the fact that he found it so funny. He kept on apologising.
Yes, it's
quite right too. You know, he should have been ashamed. But...
Well, it's been one of the fine ones to clip out because of the corpsing. Corpsing is something that, I mean, sometimes we don't want, sometimes we frown upon, but honestly, sometimes it's an absolute gift. And of course, Donald Sinden might qualify, Andre, for one of your mislaid comedy heroes.
I would put him in there, I guess, with Never the Twain. What was the one we did with Elaine Stritch, where he played the butler? Yes, he would get in there, and he's done a few old lovely comedy films in his time as well.
I mentioned this, listener at home, because, Andre, you did a website, which I confess, it wasn't until I was looking up some background details about you, although I know you well, but I had not come across mislaidcomedyheroes.com. How did that come about?
It was one of the things about 11 years ago. First of all, I was teaching stand-up at St Mary's University, and they asked me if I could do the history of comedy as well for the students. So I was looking into it, and at the same time, Time Out did a thing where they asked loads of comics their best 10 comedians, and most comics couldn't get past 1982.
Really?
And I was like yeah. I mean, and there was, I think one person mentioned Les Dawson. One person mentioned Ken Dodd. Apart from that, it was all modern comics. And you just kind of going, hold on, there's such a plethora of knowledge and fun out there.
Yeah.
And I kind of got into that, and I started, digging up Mrs. Shufflewick and things like that. Mrs. Shufflewick was a guy called Rex Jameson.
A drag act, that's right.
Yes. But was TV Personality of the Year 1959, 1961, and 1963. Now, when you've got those accolades and we don't remember it as comedians,
yeah,
to me that's ridiculous. To be part of something's future, you've got to know its past.
I'm one of those people who still watches broadcast telly that comes down an aerial, and as a result of which, of course, I've seen Talking Pictures TV, which you have a bit of an association with.
Yes, I've become their sort of comedy historian, and I appear on the channel every now and again talking about, a comedy old film or doing a comedy lecture that I've done live for their weekends. I try and bespoke it for where I am in whichever area. Getting into that world, it's fantastic. I had no idea, for instance, in the early 80s, we always assume that we're starting off the alternative comedy, then there's the working men's comedy, and there's nothing in between. There was the folk scene where we got Jasper Carrot and a few others. But were you aware of the long-distance lorry driver a circuit for them.
The long distance lorry driver
Yeah,
circuit.
get this.
It sounds like something Davey would use as the
Yes.
title for a strip. Where did this happen?
Well, this was at one point in major cities, lorries weren't allowed in after a certain time in sort of like the late 70s, early 80s. And so they were having like these little car parks with a hut where they'd get a drink and stuff, and they'd get a comic. So these comics was like doubling up at 2 o'clock in the morning and working these little, basically motor chefs along the motorways and along our B roads and A roads, wherever there was a lay-by. And they'd probably get, 2 comics and maybe a stripper. But I heard in the end that they didn't want a stripper that night. It was just mainly comics, just entertaining lorry drivers.
So this is predating the alternative circuit as we know it.
It was, well, just as we were starting off, really. It was, between 1980 to 1983, when the GLR then sort of like enforced that lorries could come in, or they created parks better within the city. But yeah, people were making like good money. I think at one point, the Watford Gap was always a place for comics to meet on a sort of like Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night at about 1 o'clock. You could always guarantee people pulling in there. We'd all aim for that.
Davey, are we, as comic artists who sit at desks, jealous of the sociability of these comedians and these mobile entertainers?
Yeah, I wish I could work in a shed full of long-distance lorry drivers. That's great.
To be fair, at least we have a job which won't be replaced by dogging.
Yes, yeah, there is that, yeah.
You, Davey, pick quite a lot of, I would say, classic and vintage entertainers as the subject matter for your strips. I mean, we've seen everything from Joe Pasquale to Bruce Forsyth on down, featuring, and Donald Sinden, as mentioned, featuring as the centerpiece of your strips. What particularly gives you a fascination or makes someone write?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, really. I mean, those sorts of strips partially came out of reading a lot of film fun comics from the olden days. I think in the Viz office there was a collection of sort of film fun type strips, and we started doing cartoons about people as if they were the sort of subject of film fun cartoons. Like, so we'd do one about Oswald Mosley, and it would be very sort of jolly and slapstick and all that sort of stuff.
Because I happen to know the panels that you guys have chosen, we can happily talk about film fun. That's not one of the ones that's come up, but it's one that I'm not sure a lot of listeners at home would remember. Andre, do you remember film fun and radio?
Yeah, I was just looking down trying to find the annuals. I've got a few film fun annuals knocking around. But yeah, I mean, all of that early stuff I think is fantastic. And the fact that, Norman Wisdom, Tommy Trinder, Will Hay, all ended up in these lovely little strips like that. Were, I think, and the average film fan could walk away with those in their pocket. I could totally understand. I'm just looking down. I've got loads of Archie Andrews.
Right.
Annuals.
Archie Andrews is a brilliant one. For anyone who's not come across Archie Andrews, it was the ventriloquist who was done on the radio. Not sure how they did it in a comic strip. Did they pretend he was a little boy, or did they just
basically? Yeah, he
Right.
is. Yes, Peter Brough, who was the vent, and Archie was the little boy. But it was also all those so many characters that they had around him. I mean, if you actually look at Educating Archie as a radio show, it is the one that introduced nearly everyone. Hattie Jakes, Tony Hancock, Dick Emery, they all came from Educating Archie.
And Radio Fun added, of course, that element that radio didn't have. Although they used that cliche that the pictures are better in radio, I'm with Alan Partridge on this. They're not. They actually don't exist. But Radio Fun, the comic, brought these people to life.
Variety Bandbox was huge. Variety Bandbox had its own separate comic at one point.
Really?
Hard to find, but yeah.
Magnificent. And the target audience for these wasn't necessarily kids, was it? We think of kids' comics as being, that's the phrase we use. But Radio Fun and Film Fun, it was family. And It didn't exclusively just mean kids.
Totally that. I think everyone bought them.
I mean, do you think that it was parents buying the magazine for kids because they recognised, you know, Sid James or Archie Andrews on the cover and thought, I'll buy that for the kids. So I sort of, I can't really imagine the family all gathered around the copy of Radio Fun, the comic or something. Or maybe they did, I don't know.
Well, nobody did things that were so age bracketed because basically nobody did anything that we would have called post-watershed. Sweary words didn't happen. The BBC, which was the only broadcaster, had those strict regulations. Do you remember them, Andre? The things that you could not do. One phrase was "winter draws on."
Yeah. Winter draws on was never allowed. No vicar jokes, no religious jokes, no jokes about Scotsmen's wallets.
And so it meant that everything was sort of family entertainment. And the same would go for the comics. But you had funny sort of crossovers in that people would quite regularly be smoking in Radio Fun, in Film Fun. Desperate Dan has quite a few stories based around, in the Dandy obviously, based around trying to get a good smoke in his big long pipe. And he ends up like taking lampposts and sticking a ship on the end and filling it full of tobacco. So it's being bought, I guess, by 8-year-olds who like a smoke.
and a cow pie with horns sticking out the side. I would have loved one of them.
I mean, you could buy sort of sweet cigarettes back in those days. So, I mean, smoking was much more child-friendly.
Spanish, do you remember Spanish tobacco? The little coconut.
It was sweet tobacco, wasn't it?
Yes. Coconut, sweet Spanish tobacco is what it was.
So what would you do? Stuff it into a
you ate it. You chewed
just
the
ate
tobacco.
It, right.
Yeah, it was the idea was you learned to chew tobacco with coconut.
We were being groomed. That's not what we're talking about today. Today, we're talking about the panels that you guys have brought in for us to look at. Davey has brought something in, Andre's brought something in, and I'm going to share Davey's panel first. Let's have a look at this little baby here. I'm going to ask Andre to describe what he can see.
I am looking at an elderly gentleman with a walrus moustache, smoking a cigar, quite clearly with I would say, a very ornamented waistcoat, wing collars, looking very much like Arthur Lowe. With a walrus moustache. Naturally, I, your squire, and a direct descendant of Sir Horatio, will play the part of the distinguished gent.
I like that little bit of onomatopoeia. Reader at home, you'll be able to find the images that we're sharing on the programme notes on the website link. And if you look at this on YouTube, it'll be filling your screen now. And what Andre just pronounced was a bit of onomatopoeia. It's written on the page as A-HR-R-RM! And that is one of the joys of comics, isn't it, Davey? Making up the spelling?
Oh, very much, yeah. And this one particularly, I don't know why I like it so much.
Now, before we find out where it's from, I'd like Andre to have a guess. Andre, based on what you're looking at there, do you have any idea where this might come from?
I've no idea. The artwork is really lovely.
For the panelologists at home who study line and technique, I can tell you that this is line drawn, because this is line drawn with pen and brush on board long before any electronic techniques were invented. And what I'm going to do is share the pull back and reveal. We're going to have a look at the whole rest of the page that this comes from, that Davey has also seen. And we begin, wow, look at that. Describe that for me, Andre.
It almost looks like an Ealing comedy. We have, again, the elderly gentleman, what looks like talking to, could be two workers and a vicar, and they're talking about the battle, commemorate the battle with a pageant. So it's obviously something that's happening in the village. And then we have the old gentleman dressed as playing obviously Horatio Nelson, I would guess. Man, the Avenger gentleman, we are due on the river in half an hour. Aye, squire. Meanwhile, up the river, grand pageant today at Wormwood on Wold. Gosh, I wish I could have had a part in the pageant. Somebody is sitting by what looks like barrels. It feels like whiskey galore in some form.
What pleases me is that, Andre, you don't recognise that guy who's in the final panel. I, of course, do, because he's a bit of a mislaid comedy hero, but in comic strip form. This is a comic character I recognise who was around at the very start of the 1960s, and he's drawn by one of the comedy legends of our trade, Davey. Would you like to fill us in on who it is we're looking at?
It was a comic strip called Jonah, which was in the Beano from 1958 through
Jeepers.
some point in the 1960s. And it's drawn by Ken Reid, who was, as Kev says, he really was one of the greats.
Ken Reid's an absolute legend who also does Frankie Stein, and he did The Tricks of Screwy Driver, which was very influential on you, wasn't he, Davey?
I don't think he did the Screwy. That was Bill Holroyd did. Who was actually Ken Reid's brother-in-law, oddly enough. But
Comic nepotism.
Oh, sorry. And I've spent all this time mixing the two of them up. It's because Davey does the strip Gilbert Ratchet.
Yes, which was based on Screwy Driver. It's Ken Reid did Roger the Dodger. That was his other famous Beano creation, and a lot more. But then in the 60s, he left the Beano, DC Thompson, and he went to Oddham's, where he did work for Wham, which, as you say, he did Frankie Stein, and he did some amazing stuff for them.
Well, Queen of the Seas was the nautical strip that he did for Oddham's, following on from the nautical strip Jonah. I don't know if he had a nautical connection. Do you know much about him?
He was very keen on boats, so I think it was his idea to do. He had a big collection of books about ships and so on, so he had a lot of reference material, and he owned a canal boat, I think, which sank. In the 1960s, which obviously had to do that. But I mean, he also had some model boats in his home, I believe, which he'd used as reference. And so the episodes of Jonah, which take place on ships, which is a lot of them, but the backgrounds are absolutely spot on. They're really lovely.
Yeah, and as we just saw with that image that I've just taken off the screen, the location setting, he did a drawing of the church and he did a drawing of the village, and that mise en scène was a thing that maybe we get a little bit less of in the Beano and Dandy type artwork of today. I think we're more on the side of simplicity rather than that kind of realistic detail.
I mean, that mentioning that it looked like the opening of an Ealing comedy, I think that's spot on. That's exactly what it feels like. He'd set this little scene. And the characters would tend to be quite simple because they'd appear for a week or so maybe and then disappear, apart from Jonah.
And Jonah is very much a comedy trope that chimes across the board. The guy who is accident prone. In America, you had Jerry Lewis, and in this country, it was Norman Wisdom, really, wasn't it, Andre, who was that kind of something bad will happen when this guy appears.
Yeah. I mean, Norman. I think in all the film funds, Norman's is totally that. Is there is the thing that breaking, and how does he get out of this problem? It probably moved into with Charlie Drake as well. I think there were Charlie Drakes in the later film funds, who again, I mean, The Worker, the whole sitcom is that, isn't it? It's just going to see Mr. Pugh and then trying to get a job, and then how does he ruin it?
And we really do have the realm of the forgotten creators. The thing with someone like Charlie Drake, he was the biggest in the country. Norman Wisdom was like the biggest in this country and Eastern Europe, and there's nothing much keeping them alive. Do we have statues for these comedians?
I don't, neither for Norman or Charlie Drake. I mean, Drake really, suffered towards the end of his life, drunk and, falling in and out of Jim Davison sex pantos and living next door to his agent who could then keep an eye on him.
Oh no.
Laurie Mansfield. I mean, it was just, yeah. And I mean, Norman, I mean, there should be one maybe in the Isle of Man. They loved him there, and that's where he lived towards the end of his days.
And France, isn't he? Didn't he get the
Albania? Albania is the big country that loved Norman.
Right.
Absolutely adored him. He's just there. That wouldn't surprise me if there are statues of him there. France is Jerry Lewis. They're crazy for Jerry Lewis in France.
And the thing with the comics creators is that not only do we have to have our work cut out reminding people of them nowadays, people didn't know about them in those days. Ken Reed would have never signed his work, would he, Dave?
No, that's right. When he was at DC Thompson, when he was drawing for the Beano, he wouldn't have signed his work then. He started signing his work when he moved to Wham and Smash in the 60s.
It was very much the policy of the publishers, wasn't it, to pretend that the artists didn't exist, especially in the case of DC Thompson, so that they couldn't be poached, I suppose.
That could well be. It's also it creates a sort of world. I mean, the Beano artist would appear in strips, wouldn't he? You'd see him in a sort of floppy beret, and you know he'd make a kind of an appearance, but it would be a sort of generic Beano artist that appeared, and so I guess the kids would get the impression that it all takes place in Beano Towers.
But yes, especially with the example of the Sparky comic, they made up an entire fictional editorial team in the Sparky, didn't they? Including
Throgmorton.
Throgmorton was the name I was groping for.
That was. I enjoyed that as a kid. I really enjoyed that Sparky. It's called the Sparky People, I think, wasn't it? And they don't want to give the impression that a lot of separate individual people are contributing to the comic. It wants to be Beano Towers is like a sort of a fun house, you know, where everything's done in the building, you know.
That was my dream when I was growing up, that I could be part of. In my case, it was the Marvel Bullpen was this place they built this picture of. Subsequently, I have read books about it. Turns out not to have been as much fun as we all imagined. Is it like that in the Viz offices? Is it actually a big ball of fun and you all sit around cracking jokes? I know you did it once for a documentary, but was that real?
Well, I mean, there isn't really a Viz office now. It was decided that was a bit unnecessary to have an office. But yeah, there was a ball pool and actually there wasn't a ball pool and a slide or anything. But it was always very fair. I mean, it was a good laugh, but in a quiet way. There was a lot of people sitting around drawing quietly.
So, did you brainstorm in the way of an American writer's room?
Yeah, there was. There was. I mean, the Viz offices always had a drawing studio where everyone had their desks up, and there'd be a writing room where people would go through and sit around and go a lot. It helped me a lot because I moved up to Newcastle in 1996, and up till then I'd been freelancing from Wales. And I must admit, I was running out of steam by 1996 because I think I got in a bit of a rut of thinking up ideas for cartoons. And so moving up to Newcastle and sort of joining the team, and that was that sort of put me back on track, I think. And you know, the way everyone would throw in ideas and if you were stuck, somebody would generally like that Donald Sinden strip. I remember writing that. That would have been the late 1990s, and it was about 3 days before deadline, and I couldn't think of a script to draw. I had another page to do, and I remember we were sitting in the studio, and Graham and Thorpe were both working at their cartoons. And I was like chewing my pencil and panicking a bit. And Graham said, well, why don't you do a cartoon about Donald Sinden called There Goes My Knighthood? And he kind of came out with the whole idea. And then Thorby started chipping stuff in. And I was frantically writing notes down because I just jotted down notes and then I'd go away and put them together.
I'm going to throw something out here.
Please.
Something I just want to throw out while you're talking about that. Something I've noticed, again, studying the comedy history, the Northeast, the comics that come out of there that are so surreal. When you go back to, there's a guy called Ernie Lottinger, right back in the 1920s, who was the first person to actually create a troupe that went around. And some of his sketches are completely off the wall. And then you get someone like Bobby Thompson, who's like, I was in the fish and chip shop and in walks Hitler. And I said, what are you doing in here? He said, I love the scraps. That surrealism. And then when you go into yourselves and Vic and Bob and Ross and every comic that I sort of know from that area. And it's something that I don't know why. Why does that area bring out that sort of nutterage?
The sort of Viz attitude is, well, you either you're going to get this or you're not. we don't really care too much about it. It's never been sort of particularly directed as an audience, I don't think. So, and also a lot of the people we do cartoons about are largely forgotten anyway. I mean, I did do one a couple of months ago which had Charlie Drake in it. I think I can't remember the title of the cartoon, but it had Charlie Drake, Nick Drake, and Sir Francis Drake flying around in an aeroplane or something. I think Drake's on a plane. Drake's on a plane. That's what it was called. You couldn't particularly expect people to know who Charlie Drake was or who Nick Drake was. I mean, they'd probably know who Francis Drake was, Sir Francis Drake was, but it's kind of, well, you either get this or you don't. If you don't get it, then just go to the next page.
Well, what we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at the panel that Andre has brought in. Okie dokie. Davey, now, you've got a lot less material to work with, a lot fewer lines. Viewer at home, you'll see this on the YouTube screen, you'll see it in the holding image, and, Davey's description will do the whole job. Davey, without guessing yet what it is, can you tell us what you're looking at?
Well, it's a head and shoulders picture of a very cartoony man with a big nose and glasses. And he's saying they want to establish an interfaith dialogue, and there's a speech bubble coming off stage, as it were, which says, "But I'm no expert on Judaism." And this looks like it's a photograph of an original drawing by the looks of it.
Yes, for the listener at home and the panelologist who studies line and technique, I can tell you that we know it's original artwork because there's a little pencil scribble saying P84, a little pencil scribble saying 49% all outside the margins. And then we can see the 4.2, which I would guess means it's the 2nd of April's edition of an American newspaper strip. Davey, would you like to have a little bit more of a guess at what it might be?
I have no idea what the strip is. It does look like a sort of daily newspaper strip. I don't recognise the character at all.
Well, Andre is holding up to the camera the full image. I'll stop the share so that as big as we can. I see it's from a book that replicates the strips but makes them discoloured like the actual artwork. Oh, and you know what? That character who is in that picture is not the person I thought. That character is having a conversation with the star of the strip. Now, Davey, can you see the star of the strip?
You see, that's why I couldn't really show you the whole panel, because it would give away who exactly it is.
Because, of course.
So it's a Woody Allen strip.
It is the Woody Allen strip.
Tell us more, Andre, about the strip that we're just looking at then.
Well, it's from the Woody Allen strip. It's by a guy called Stu Hampel. Stu Hampel, who used to work on Lil Abner, and also his big famous one was Rich and Famous. He did a cartoon strip called Rich and Famous that was every day, a gag a day, he was known as, at the company that he worked for. And they worked for all the newspapers that, in North America. And they would give you the strip, a daily strip. And he got to know Woody Allen and came up with this idea he wanted to do called Inside Woody Allen, but couldn't sell it as himself. And so he did it as a guy called Joe Marthan. And it ran from 76 to 84 in lots and lots of newspapers.
It's signed as Joe Marthan, is it?
Yes. So if you see this one, this is a lovely one with a Johnny Carson show.
Oh, right,
and you see that he signed it down here, Joe Marthan. But as I say, it's Stuart Hampel who actually created it. Now, I've got this book, which is a lovely book from America called Driven Superficiality, which is a complete one. But there was, in the 70s, the British one, which was Inside Woody Allen.
Tried to get my hands on it because when I was doing my comic adaptation of the Bible, I was doing the Book of Esther, which was commissioned by Bible Society, and I wanted to cast Woody Allen as Mordecai. I ended up making it Larry David because the Woody Allen slurs and stories were coming out about that time.
Right.
Which actually does take us into an interesting realm. Davey, have you done Woody Allen in Viz?
No, I don't think so, no.
Because if you did, what would the angle be?
Well, yeah, it would be tricky, wouldn't it? I'm not sure. Maybe that's why we haven't done him.
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it, Andre? The mislaid comedy heroes run parallel to the comedy heroes who, when we look back into the details, we probably think differently about.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard to, distinguish between the art itself and the crime. With Woody Allen, we still have to say, was there a crime? I mean, he's always been found not guilty, and he's always said he's not guilty. And now we've got a documentary that was quite clearly going after him from the word go, by pointing out every, moment in every film where there seems to be a little bit that, something that makes him a bit suspect. But then again, when you have someone like Michael Jackson, it's completely ignored because, everyone just goes, well, he's the king of pop still.
Talking Pictures TV features a lot that needs a warning before it. And we watched a Steve Martin film, The Man with Two Brains, and the sexism and objectivity made you go a little bit cringe.
Yeah.
You didn't realise at the time. Well, I didn't.
Yeah. You go back and, you watch a classic and you sit there and go, didn't realise just how many times they were going to say that offensive word when you watch Blazing Saddles.
How does Woody Allen come across in the comic strip then?
Again, it's Woody Allen-esque all the way through. Apparently, he wrote quite a few of the jokes and himself, even though he was so busy. But there are moments of him playing the clarinet, moments of him, like I say, questioning his life, the usual Allen-esque world that we expect.
A very interesting thing to have a comedian being written for. I mean, Woody Allen famously starts as a writer writing for other people like Sid Caesar, and then he's somebody who his words are his thing. So to have somebody else putting words in Woody Allen's mouth for a newspaper strip, yeah, that would be interesting.
It's quite surprising to hear that he was involved in the cartoon strip about him. I never imagined that ever happened. Well, not very often anyway.
Well, apparently Stu Hempel went to him and said, I'm going to do this. I'd like to do this. And he said, well, I'm really busy. And he went, oh, that's a shame. He said, but I've got these ideas. And he showed Woody Allen, and Woody Allen went, oh, that's funny. Let's just do that. And he just changed it and sort of, what about if I said this? What about if I said that? And within 2 hours, he said he had 2 years of strips.
I was thinking of any other comedians who've been put into a comic strip, and I remember in the 1970s there was a regular one about Billy Connolly, done by a friend of his in Glasgow. But after a while, Billy asked for him to stop doing it because he was putting things basically in Billy's mouth that was not the sort of thing he'd say. About sectarian football divide, I think was the sticking point there.
Oh, wow.
Right.
But other examples?
I can't think. I mean, unless we go back to Film Fun and... Oh, Look In.
Look In. Benny Hill was the lead strip in Look In. Taking over from Leslie Crowther, I seem to remember.
Oh, really?
There is a Look In comedy annual, which is... I have it. I can't see it around at the moment. But yeah, there is. There was just given out for nothing but comedy, and it's all strips. As On the Buses is in there.
Look-In was the comedy comic of my childhood, and an interesting one that would be very difficult to do now because they did official sanctioned adaptations of, it was almost entirely ITV strips, but yeah, On the Buses, the Doctor TV series, Benny Hill. Now we're talking about the days when there wasn't a watershed. Benny Hill appears in a weekly comic that's definitely for kids. We thought Benny Hill was for kids. I was watching those Benny Hill things when I'm, 8, 9, 10. And by God, I wouldn't show them to much of those later sexy orientated ones. I wouldn't show to an adult now.
Again, I'm not going to sit here and defend it because sometimes it is sometimes hideous. But in those programs, you'd also get a 7-minute silent film that would just be fantastic. It would just be the story of a watering can, of how it was found and where it ends up. And we just follow a watering can for 7 minutes that's just gag, 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 gag. I was watching one the other day. I've now got some stuff from him right back at the 60s. And there's a nudist colony. And it's almost the same joke and same way to sell it as the Saturday Night Live nudist colony with the fence, where everybody's walking around and the fence is just covering up your privates.
Oh, which Austin Power goes on to. Everybody thinks of that as an Austin Powers thing. But yes, Benny Hill was a really creative and revolutionary comedian in the early 60s. A lot of people went off the rails with the permissiveness of the 1960s, which allowed you to say things that in your younger days you couldn't do. I think Woody Allen falls foul of that as well, because when Woody Allen is working within the parameters of the Sid Caesar show and he's working within the parameters of what a stand-up can do to cross over onto TV in the 1960s, he is making stuff that you can broadcast at any hour of the day for any audience. And then everything you ever wanted to know about sex but were afraid to ask crosses the Comedy Delaware.
Yeah, I mean, that's when he kind of went, let's do it, let's knock it out the park. And I think you probably look at a lot of comedians and we look at it now with our glasses of 21st century, and we can go, there are some things even in Laurel and Hardy that I look and go, wow, I can't believe they just did that.
Like what?
You might ask, like what, Davey? Well, on Talking Pictures TV recently, they did run the blackface Laurel and Hardy story.
Oh, God.
Stories.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Yeah. There's a few. Let's disguise ourselves, and obviously Ollie was from the deep south. He was, he was born in Georgia, and
born in Georgia in the 19th century. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do appreciate have changed. And I think as comedians, which I think we all count as, we reflect our times. I think people outside our various businesses think that you make a decision about you're going to say something that says this in this way because it's pertinent. But sometimes you do it because it works and because it's the time that you're making it. And then years later, things look different.
Yeah. There's some Pipsqueak and Wilfred that I looked at recently that, how was that, 1920s?
That sounds right.
Maybe.
And my word, there's some fantastic racism in there. Jesus, it's quite frightening that, kids were just looking at this.
I have issue 1 of the Dandy Monster comic, which is what they called the first Dandy Annual. And that's from the 1940s. I forget its date.
Like 1940, I think, probably.
Yeah, but the N-word features regularly as a description for a group of minstrels who appear in a number of the stories. And they reprinted that in the 21st century without, I think, a warning on the cover, because who's going to buy a Dandy Annual from the 1940s? Not an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Benny Hill appeared in TV Fun in the 50s, didn't he, as well? It was just mentioning him in Look-In.
Right.
But the Benny Hill character, it was either TV Fun or Radio Fun, I imagine. But he was, that would have been his earlier incarnation.
Well, similarly, in the 1950s Film Fun and Radio Fun, the Frankie Howard that you've got there is the family entertainer making family films.
The sort of young man.
Yeah, not the person doing Up Pompeii, which was very much a sex comedy by Talbot Rothwell.
Yeah. which I still watch that on a fairly regular basis, I'm afraid. I don't know what it is. There's a lot of comfort in watching Up Pompeii.
Well, we have just been looking at Jonah by Ken Reid, brought in by Davey, and the Woody Allen newspaper strip by Joe Martin, aka Stu Hempel, brought in by Andre. Guys, where can we find you out and about in the world, online, on screen? Andre, where do we find you these days?
Still gigging, facing the wrong way to most people in the room, but the Talking Picture TV events, obviously, a few of those. I'm at the Bolton Comedy Festival as well, doing a history of Bolton comedy, which I thought once I'd said Peter Kay, I'd have nothing else. But man, Bolton is absolutely full of comedy history. Yeah, through the whole of the summer, doing stuff for Talking Pictures, and also Virgin Cruises, because I need the money and I'm selling me soul.
Online, where do we find you, Andre?
Just the website exists. Like you said, Mislaid Comedy Heroes. There's a YouTube channel as well, Mislaid Comedy Heroes, of old stuff. If you are into looking at old stuff, have a look there. I found some very weird and rare stuff worth looking at. Old clowns, old vaudeville performers, variety performers, all sorts of people.
And Davey, where do we find you these days?
In Viz Comic every 5 weeks. I do a couple of cartoon strips.
Every 5 weeks, is it? Not every bi-month anymore.
No, it's not. It's everything. It's coming out all the time now. Yeah, so every 5 weeks I'm in there, and I'm on Blue Sky occasionally. I think I'm Davy Jones at Blue Sky, or however that works. And you'll find me in my local park, pushing my dog around in a pram every day.
Thank you, listeners at home. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a review. You have been listening to Andre Vincent and Davy Jones.
Thank you.
Cheers, fella.
Hey, if you're enjoying this episode of Comic Cuts, the panel show, don't forget there's an entire back catalogue and a first season for you to catch up on. My guests have included comic folk like Brian Bolland, Rachel Smith, Metafrog, Gary Northfield, Nigel Octoluni, Nigel Parkinson, Laura Howell, Sonia Long, David Leitch. We've had the comics laureate Hannah Berry, resident alien creator Peter Hogan, podcasters like Adam Roche, legendary singer-songwriter Dean Friedman, Jessica Martin. The list of comedians includes Ashley Storey, Bethany Black, Will Hodgson, Paul Carenza, Izzy Lawrence, Doug Siegel. There is too many to list. And they've brought in comics from Marvel and DC to the Bunty and the Eagle, from Robert Crumb to Viz, webcomics, obscure manga, all points in between. And sometimes we don't talk about comics at all. Don't forget to click and subscribe, leave a review, and tell a friend. For example, what could these two be talking about?
Man with a swastika on his shirt. He's got his trousers down, his bum out, and he's standing with his feet in a bucket of pig shit on a stage. There's lots of people looking behind him, and he's saying, oh yes, I can feel it coming out now. Go on, fuck off out of it, you blasted queen.